All right, let's go. The Eagles hosted open practice with fans getting a really good look at Saquon Barkley in the midnight green. Plus, a couple rookies continue to up their stock, as does Nolan Smith, who flat out beat Lane. And Jalen Carter's making a habit out of dominating Mekhi Becton. However, Fangio's defense struggled because Jalen Hurts is on another level, since Kellen Moore is doing something crazy to the Eagles' offense. And with the NFL's new kickoff rules, what advantage does Philly have? So let's talk about it. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? So let me just start out by saying thank you, because Underdog Fantasy is now the official sponsor of the Philly Special Show. And I'm not gonna lie, I never really envisioned actually having an official channel sponsor, but here we are. And on that same note, if you want up to $250 in bonus cash, feel free to use code Philly Special, link in the description. Also on that same note, it's kind of cool to join teams with Bill Belichick, since he signed with Underdog to do a weekly show called Coach, where he'll break down game film while providing his unfiltered thoughts and analysis. And let's just say Coach wouldn't necessarily have loved the game film from the Eagles practice, but we'll get to that in a second. Now, speaking of new gigs though, Howie Roseman actually offered Jason Kelce a scouting job to work alongside him, telling Kay Adams that Jason would be a perfect fit for that role, since after all, he scouted his own replacement in Cam Jurgens, who's been one of the camp standouts. Which, come on, I think most of us would agree Kelce's going to eventually end up back in the organization at some point. However, for now, he's on the big screen, and I'd say he pretty much killed it while rocking the Parisian beret on set. Since in case you weren't aware, Jason was very recently in France to support the US athletes at the Olympics. And yeah, it's a given he's made quite the impact on a ton of people, but who knew his post-Super Bowl Mummers speech would inspire the US men to win gold in rowing for the first time since 1960?
I was there in front of the museum, and I had my girlfriend on my shoulder when he was giving that speech, and I'm just like, I'm excited. So all these years later, bringing that mentality, I wish I had a dog mask because I'd put that on. So, go Birds.
Go Birds, baby. Also, I think this just absolutely confirms it, but we are America's team. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't hear any Cowboys inspiring Olympic athletes. Heck, let's be honest, they're just having trouble getting fans to show up to camp, with several Dallas players, including Zeke Elliott, noting that there's not that many people in the stands.
It seemed like it was a little bit less people than the last couple of times I've been out here, but felt the same.
You said less fans. Look here.
Let me just say, in all fairness, if I were a Dallas fan like some of my family members, the product on the field would leave a bit to be desired. Plus, like Brunson noted, Zeke's out there looking like he's 45. Oh yeah, and your GM, the one who doesn't have a clue, well yeah, he's living up to expectations.
You need to have a feel of where the revenue is going to be down the road. I feel like I know better than anybody living. I've got a feel for what the revenue is going to be 4, 5, 6 years from now than anybody living. I've spent all this time doing that, and I understand it. And if you don't understand what the revenue is going to be, then you can't look ahead and see what the gap is going to be. Frankly, I've got a better feel, I think, than anybody, because I have a sense of what revenues might be for the whole league 4, 5, 6 years from now. And so that if you see me optimistic, then you must know that I think it's pretty good. If you see me a little cautious, you must know that I'm being cautious. I'm quick to be repeated. But I didn't add that the other day, but I'm the best at looking around corners. Now, I don't know what that is. But as far as body language and instincts, I'm better than anybody.
The thing about looking into the future and then saying you're going all in while really not going all in doesn't necessarily work. And then add on top of that the fact that a judge just ruled in favor of the NFL by overturning the $4.7 billion Sunday ticket verdict. Although yes, I think we all realize this thing ain't over yet. However, you can't deny the irony or just the comedy of Jerry Jones' comments and really the timing of the whole thing. By the way, when he says I've got a better feeling than anybody and predicting the future, he's talking about the near 30 years since they've been to the NFC Championship game, right? It's no wonder fans aren't showing up to camp.
This is the party.
This is room 308.
Party Central. So what can I do you for? All right.
Yeah, well, like I said, what'd you expect? Meanwhile, it's not surprising that the link was lit, with nearly 50,000 fans showing up to rep the Birds and show that support. For real, it's not surprising, but you guys showed out, because, we do support our own. Also, talking about an event at the link, in case you can't go to the game in Brazil but are wanting to be at an event in person, Jeff Kerr shared the Eagles will host a season kickoff party at the link for the game versus the Packers, with those tickets going on sale Monday, $30 for the lower bowl and $35 for the club level. Or maybe I'm biased, but Thomas and I will be live streaming for every single game, so you could just swing by for the virtual watch party. And who knows, maybe the Packers decide to go with their new white helmet for that game, as nearly every single team seems to have one. So maybe the Birds should just take Isaiah Rodgers' lead on that one. Like seriously, I know I've seen a million comments at this point, but if they had an alternate helmet that looked exactly like that, everyone would be all over it. Of course, y'all know with the topic of the white helmet, I had to bring this one up, but make sure to hit that sub button because as soon as we get to 75,000 subs for the channel, I'm going to be giving away this bad boy to one lucky subscriber, which just FYI is signed by Zay for those that didn't know. Also, Zay seems to continue to be perfect when it comes to the swag. For example, like the custom-made Spider-Man cleats that he got, notably adding Dallas Sucks to the bottom of them, and then deciding to rock those at the open practice, which just so happened to be National Spider-Man Day. For real, like the timing can't get any better, which is obviously why Zay is one of the fan favorites. Yet maybe not quite on the level of BG, with Anthony DeBona sharing that BG had one of the biggest ovations during player introductions. Well, until then Saquon Barkley came onto the field and got his first taste of just how insane Eagles fandom is. Except Jalen Hurts topped both of those by quite a bit once he finally made his way onto the field. But I mean, come on, it is Mr. Breed of One. Yet while the support was there for Jalen, apparently I saw reports of people booing James Bradberry when he was announced. And sure, I don't think JB is the best option for this roster, nor do I think that he makes the team, but come on, seriously, booing him? I mean, remember, he does seem to have that team-first attitude, saying he recognized the talent coming in and wanted to see where else he could be used and potentially help the squad, which I can definitely appreciate the character, yet again, there's just too much depth in my mind to get him a role. Unlike Landon Dickerson, though, with Sirianni providing an update that he has a knee injury but thankfully will not miss a whole lot of time. However, it was a bit strange to see a Dickerson jersey walking around during warm-ups. Except upon further review, it was actually Lane Johnson, with Landon deciding to play a trick on everyone and swapping jerseys. Who knows, maybe the guys were just trying to draw extra attention to the special uniform since they're supporting the Eagles Autism Foundation, which they'll be auctioning off for charity if you're interested in one. Anyway, getting back to practice, I can't tell you guys how many comments I got and videos sent to me and really clips and everything else, which was super cool by the way. But seeing the fellas warm up had to be insane. You know, just because football is officially back, and not gonna lie, I probably had a little bit of FOMO. Now, unfortunately, for a couple of fellas, they had to sit out of this one, with John McMullen sharing Oren Burks was out with a knee injury, Landon Dickerson the knee, like I said, also Mekhi Garner and a hamstring, Josh Jobe who had a concussion, and Tyler Steen dealing with the ankle. So, as has been the common story and theme, Mekhi Becton is going to have ample time to earn that right guard spot, with not only Sirianni being complimentary, but the players have that belief in him too.
I think anytime you got that height difference up front, you know, it's definitely a thing. I think that, you know, it's important to kind of have it firm inside and kind of let those guys outside do what they do. But I think Mekhi has stepped in and he's done a great job. He's done a great job. He's taken the coaching from Coach Stout, and it's honestly been like a collaborative thing of everybody just having good conversation and feeding off of one another and our feedback for one another. And you know, hopefully he can continue to step up there.
When do you kind of need to say, all right, I need to know who's playing next to me?
Yeah, I'd like to know before week one. But no, I mean, I played with different guards past few years. I think, you know, the most important thing is these next few weeks as we practice against other teams, joint practices, you know, if we play in the preseason games, just build that, you know, that nucleus between whoever I'm playing. So a lot of it goes down with communication, repetition. So if it's Mekhi or Steen or whoever it is, I would like to have as many reps possible so I can get a feel for his play style and, you know, grow from there. But with each guy, it only gets better with reps. So, but hopefully I'll know here in the next couple weeks.
I'm not going to speculate on who Lane is probably wanting next to him or who he wants to play beside, but still, having that core unit together and getting that blending, the chemistry and everything else makes complete sense. Of course, shout out to Anthony DeBona for the clip, but Jalen Carter is definitely not helping Mekhi Becton look any good, as the Bread Man once again very easily beat the mountain on an inside move. Yet if I'm being real, and like I've said before, getting beat by JC is one thing and doesn't entirely concern me. However, the next rep in the drill going up against Moro Jomo and still getting pushed back quite a bit might be at least a little worrisome. Granted, it's just a couple reps and still a long way to go. Plus, as Anthony noted later, Becton actually settled in better in 11-on-11s than he did on 1-on-1 drills. But having seen that and listening to Jalen and Lane's comments and everything else there, has anything changed about your perspective of Mekhi in the right guard spot? Also, how do you feel about Nakobe Dean starting with the first team defense in 7-on-7s? With Chris Franklin breaking the news that he and Isaiah Rodgers started along with Slay and Devin White, which is at least somewhat notable since it's the first time we've seen Dean going in ahead of Zack Baun, although that didn't necessarily last long with Baun rotating in fairly quickly. But the first play obviously had to be a handoff to Saquon Barkley, especially after the way he was introduced to the crowd. And then the next play was another handoff to Saquon because why not? Yet I should point out that seeing the immediate penetration into the backfield from Jalen Carter is promising, just like another glance at Jordan Davis for sticking with the play and making the tackle. Obviously, that still would have resulted in a couple yards, but the reason I bring that up is because there was not a whole lot to write home about for the defense, since the offense was humming. And shout out to E-Rock, as you'll notice Jalen Hurts then took a handoff for a big gain up to midfield, followed by some, oh my gosh, is that actually motion being used in this Eagles offense? Sorry, I didn't recognize it, but it worked, with QB1 hooking up with A.J. Brown for a 40-yard completion as A.J. got behind Slay. Like, I know there's no doubting this, but we've got the best wide receiver duo in the league. Which is cool to see players around the NFL notice that too, with Commanders wide receiver Jahan Dotson saying AJ's our generation's Julio Jones. I mean, not bad to be compared to a future Hall of Famer. But then, to cap off that drive, the Eagles ended up hitting Dallas Goedert in the flat to put one on the board. Now look, it goes without saying the first team offense is absolutely loaded. However, the second team offense basically kind of had their way with the defense as well, with John McMullen saying Kenny Gainwell owns Nakobe Dean in the passing game, since playoff Kenny showed up and figuratively broke Nakobe's ankles en route to a big gain after the catch. By the way, to make matters worse, Gainwell did that at least 2 other times to Dean later on in practice, so not a great look. I'm not saying it's a nail in the coffin, but again, you say that in terms of Nakobe and guarding the pass and coverage and everything else there, you don't love to see it. Anyway, getting back to that second team drive, Kenny Pickett found Johnny Wilson on a curl route out of the slot for a first down. And then Grant Calcaterra continued to increase his stock, making 2 big catches on the drive before Gainwell finished by punching it in for a score. Which I know it's still early, but I'm starting to think Grant's got tight end 2 locked up. Oh, and how great is it to have the offense clicking? I mean, seriously, the defense had no answers. Maybe the only thing was like Brooks Cabina shared, Jalen Carter heaved Mekhi Becton aside with one powerful shove and disrupted Saquon Barkley in the backfield. Yet still, that hardly did anything to slow down the offense. With the ones coming back out for round 2, but this time Britton Covey was wide receiver 3, as Jalen connected initially to Smitty and then the offense got going to Saquon with a run up the middle, before finally getting Covey involved where he picked up about 15 yards. The next play appeared to be a designed run to Jalen where he was able to bounce it outside, elude Kelee Ringo, and then try to go in for a score. However, understandably, Ringo's not going to go in for a shot like the Steelers did the other day to Justin Fields that caused a skirmish. So the Birds lined it back up inside the red zone while running what appeared to be trips left with some motion and a fake handoff where Jalen had the option to run it or throw it, as he eventually got the ball to Goedert for DG's second score of the night. And again, how crazy of a play call was that? Like, we would have never seen that in Sirianni's offense. Oh yeah, this was basically what we saw the entire night. Like, those of y'all in attendance already know this, but it felt like at least 50% of the plays had some element of motion to it, in order to get a tell on the defense and then capitalize on it. And there was even Jalen under center. Although honestly, probably my favorite play of the night wasn't even a score, but more so seeing Jalen read the defense at the line, make an adjustment, and then audible to a play call that ended up gaining about 15 yards. Plus, it's not like that was a one-off thing. Because personally, you could tell Jalen had his Manning moments of reading the defense. And it's not like Jalen couldn't do this before, but I think we're finally seeing what he's capable of when he's equipped with the tools that Kellen gives him at quarterback. For real, how hyped are you watching Jalen in this offense? Now, I can't forget to mention my guy Johnny Wilson because he actually had an opportunity to score before Goedert, but barely failed to come down with the grab on this fade. Yet definitely notable considering that Johnny got first team reps here and has been getting them previously in practice, especially once the team gets inside the red zone. So even though I was kind of skeptical before, I don't think it's crazy to think that the Rook could actually legitimately carve out a starter role, or at least a part-time starter role. After all, Jalen going out of his way to praise a rookie is certainly saying something.
The goal is to put the work in. You want to put the work in and let the work, have confidence in the work, rather. Put the work in and have confidence in the work. And I give you an example of that and how that showed up. We did one-on-ones the other day, and there was, Johnny Wilson shows up and makes 2 big-time catches, but, I tell him it's no surprise when you prepare, for those situations and you put the time in like that in the offseason and you spend that quality time together, so it shows.
Let's just say don't sleep on Wilson in this offense. And the moment's not too big for him as he definitely looked like he belonged. Getting back to practice, though, Kenny Pickett put together another good drive before Tanner McKee ended up getting some second-team reps as well. However, even though McKee reportedly somewhat started to push Pickett for the backup job, the second-year player was somewhat inconsistent, making a few promising throws but also missing some open receivers and not being on the same page with Paris Campbell on a particular rep, which helped the defense make a very rare stop and bring up a Jake Elliott field goal attempt. Of course, as you'd expect, and I don't even need to tell you, but Elliott nailed the 54-yard try. Naturally, after that, the first team was hoping to keep the momentum up, which they did, despite the very brief stop on the first play of that drive, with Johnny Wilson going in motion and then a handoff to Saquon resulting in a net gain of about 7 yards, followed by another play recognition from Jalen and a great blocking from Mekhi Becton that sprung Saquon for a big gain. Now, this is the part where I bring up Nolan Smith, because he looked lightning fast going up against Pave the Lane. Like, look at dude just blowing past him to get a QB pressure. Remember, Lane was wearing Dickerson's jersey, which was what makes it look odd. But more importantly, Nolan very clearly won that rep. So, for those telling me to chill out about him beating Fred Johnson a couple days ago, there you go. He beat Pave the Lane, and seriously, I mean, all he can do is beat the guy who's lined up in front of him. Except now he actually did it and got the better of Lane. At the same time, I realize it's just one rep, but don't tell me that doesn't get you optimistic.
Don't act like you're not impressed.
I will at least admit that was about all there was to get excited about from the defense on that drive, as Mekhi Becton made a block the size of Jordan Davis to let Kenny G take off and eventually set up shop in the red zone, where we saw Jalen then not be afraid to work it over the middle of the field, yet he did end up missing Paris Campbell on what could have or should have been a touchdown. However, Jalen made up for it a couple plays later by eluding the pass rush, buying time with his legs, but still keeping his eyes downfield, and finding Dallas Goedert for his third score in basically the exact same spot he'd been all night. Like, consider how Kellen Moore's offense changes Jalen, but the fact that Jalen is still a playmaker, and I don't know how you stop this unit. Which makes it understandable why you've got beat writers, analysts, and everyone else saying he looks as sharp as ever and as confident as he ever has. At the same time, there was one play that Bryce Huff had an incredible opportunity to later pick Hurts and ended up dropping it. So it's not like he's been perfect, but dang near close. Another guy in the offense who had a really strong showing was Will Shipley, as both he and Kenny G were standouts. In fact, according to ESP, Shipley got 8 of the last 13 second-team plays directed to him. And really, the only big miss was that he allowed Jeremiah Trotter Jr. to pick up a sack on Pickett later on. Also, staying with rooks, John McMullen did share that Naismith had another drop. Meanwhile, Josh Sweat came up with a sack against the second team, which eventually led to a defensive stop. But having made it through Eagles practice, what are your biggest takeaways and who are your biggest winners and losers? Oh yeah, as far as special teams goes, John Ross, Britton Covey, and Smith and Isaiah Rodgers got in some work, with Zay being the only one who ended up muffing a punt. And then, unfortunately, during the live session between the third teams, tight end McAllen Castles got a pass but got rolled up on. And seriously, I'm genuinely curious, but considering the new NFL rules about the hip drop tackle, would this play have been considered a flag? By the way, hopefully he's alright and nothing serious because Castles actually did end up getting injured. Now, at about that same time, the Bears and Texans were kicking off for the Hall of Fame game. And let me just say, even preseason football gets me emotional. However, with the Eagles preparing for the new kickoff rules and Michael Clay calling it a building it like a house approach, not gonna lie, but the new kickoff is gonna take some time to get used to and to really fully understand. So I figured, who better than to catch up with Fox Sports NFL rules analyst Dean Blandino to get his expertise and a better idea of what to expect. Every single year I go into it and I'm like, okay, there's some adjustments, and it feels like sometimes there's smaller, change-ups or smaller, areas like, okay, that kind of makes sense. And then every so often we have a bigger shakeup. And the first one that naturally I got to go with, that I'm sure you've already been asked quite a bit, get your thoughts on, but the new NFL kickoff rule, because that's going to be drastically different. And I think a lot of people going into it are like, okay, we've seen flavors of this or some very similar, I guess, for the XFL, but can you, as best you can, I don't know how easy this is, but as best you can, explain it for the viewers out there, what's going to be so different about it, what the expectations are, and obviously, the rules and ramifications there.
Sure. Now, and this is as big a rule change as we've had in a long time. I mean, I think of some of the rule changes. I mean, there was a point in time where the NFL didn't have overtime. You think about the 2-point conversion, those types of things. This is that level because when you think about a kickoff, we all have seen the kickoff. We all know at every level, high school, college, NFL, it looks very similar. Well, this is going to look a lot different. And I think the background is that the kick return has kind of slowly gone out of the game. And last year was the lowest rate of return ever. 22% of all kicks were returned. You just have to watch the Super Bowl. I think there were 13 kickoffs, no returns. 12 of them didn't even make it into the end zone. They landed, outside the end line. So it became a non-play. And this is going to look a lot different. It does kind of come from some of the XFL elements where rather than have the kicking team start back on their side of the field and have that long run up, which tends to lead to more high speed, high impact collisions. Everybody's going to start on the return team side of the field, and you're going to have 10 kicking team players on the return team's 40, and then you're going to have the return team. You're going to have 8, no more than 9 players in what's called the setup zone at their 35 back to their 30. So you're bringing the players closer together. The kicker is back at the 35. The play doesn't begin until the ball hits the ground or is touched in the landing zone, which is the 20-yard line to the goal line, and then everybody can move. So rather than have those long run-ups, now you're going to have much closer. It's going to be more like a regular scrimmage play. And we're gonna see more returns because there's the upside is we're gonna see in terms of you could get better field position. If you just kick it through the end zone for a touchback, it's going to come out to the 30. So you're actually giving up some field position there. And that's kind of it to incentivize the kickers to put it in the field of play and then cover. So, that's it's going to look a lot different. And the thing is, it's not, sometimes there's rules changes and we go, well, we don't know when it's going to come up. Game 1, Thursday night, Chiefs Ravens. I mean, it's the first thing we're going to see.
Yeah.
So it's not like, this is what you're going to see first. So I think fans are going to like it, and it's definitely going to be different for a lot of people.
You think about the differences as you're mentioning there, but also you look around the league, it does feel like more teams have gone with a concerted effort. Obviously the Eagles, as I've been covering very closely, but it's like, hey, we need some returner guys because it won't be kicking out of the back of the end zone as we saw in the Super Bowl and all these other games, because there's now some strategy involved. And you don't want to necessarily give it, like you said, the ball going to the 30-yard line. Now, granted, with that being said, there's obviously for every rule, kind of some adjustment period. I don't know if I should at some point here bring up and ask the question of, what is a catch, what's not a catch, because that seems like it's always the question. But as far as this kickoff rule here, I'm curious, and I'm sure a lot of people are at home as well and watching, is what is the adjustment period like specifically for officials? They get the new rule. I would love to know behind the scenes what you could share, as things change. And then also, do you expect that there's going to be, I don't know, some sort of, I guess, an adjustment period of sorts with the kickoff rules?
Yeah, there's no question there's an adjustment period for the officials, just like the players and coaches, the officials. And again, because it's so different, you've had kickoff coverage that has been more or less the same over the years, where certain officials are on certain yard lines, whether they're on the sideline or in the field of play, and they're covering the play based on how the players are aligned. Well, now that's going to change drastically. So the preseason is going to be those 3 weeks of the preseason. The officials are going to kind of look at the coverage and kind of try different things to see what gives us the best opportunity to see the pressure points, right? Where the blocks are happening. And so that is absolutely an adjustment period. They've been working on it, looking at film, and the preseason is going to be a big, big opportunity for the officials to kind of work through those mechanics and get those down so there's less of an adjustment period when the regular season starts.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm curious, maybe putting you on the spot as well a little bit. How much film have you watched? Have you watched a decent amount on the kickoff rules up to this point, or?
Sure. Yeah. Well, for me, my experience, I was part of the XFL back in, prior to the 2020 season when the XFL came back. I was part of that group that kind of put that kickoff together and tried different things. Mm-hmm. So I have some experience with it, and obviously we had 2 years of XFL football. One was the COVID year, so we only got 5 weeks, but we had a full season in 2022. And so I've seen it. It's a little bit different. The NFL alignment's a little bit different. And also, it's not apples to apples when you're talking about spring football rosters versus the NFL, right? The athletes, right. It's going to be faster. It's going to be, more athletic. But I've been watching a lot, just thinking. But the thing is, and I talk to a ton of people, ton of special teams coaches. No one knows for sure how this is going to play out, right? Because it's so new, and the preseason I don't think is going to tell us everything, because a lot of teams, yes, they will want to cover, they will want to run some returns, but they're not going to show their hand as if they have something special or some kind of tactic or something they're going to do in the regular season. So I think even through the preseason, we won't know what the regular season is going to give us.
That's fair. I can understand that. Not showing all your cards, keep them close to the vest, as especially with something unique as this.
Sure.
That's interesting. I did not actually put that together or realize. But so you're the in-house expert. I mean, on this kickoff role, because you've had a lot of closest to it with the XFL and seeing the nuances. It's interesting because Britton Covey, wide receiver and punt returner for the Eagles, had mentioned in a press conference recently, saying it's all over the place. Like, the players are watching film naturally, but he's like, I think you'll see teams that use a lot of corners and safeties that they throw out there, and you'll see some teams that throw out a bunch of D linemen and linebackers to go and make the plays. Do you see from your experience of, obviously, yes, like you said, the caveat of it's a little bit different of spring football and NFL rosters, but in your mind, do you feel like there's a strategy that's more advantageous than the others? Because it feels like it's a, I don't know, more closer confined space than the traditional kickoff rule. But is there a one way that you would lean, I guess, as of this point?
Well, I look at the composition, right? The kickoff back before all these major changes, you still had big bodied players. You still had offensive and defensive linemen as part of that play because you had the wedge, right? So you have these big offensive or defensive linemen, and then you had guys that had to run down and kind of break up that wedge. That's gone away, and the kickoff, even before this change, was more of your linebackers, your cornerbacks, your running backs or receivers, more on the return side. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think we're going to see from a composition, the players out on the field. And again, what's great is that you're going to have, you can have two returners back there. So there's some creativity, some opportunity for some special plays, whether those are reverses or throwbacks. And ultimately, it really becomes more one-on-one and one-gap football where if everybody makes a block, then, that returner just gets through that front line. And now it's the kicker. And that's the other thing as we think about.
Yeah.
Our kickers are going to be asked to be a bigger part of this play beyond just kicking the football. There are going to be times when the kicker is going to have to try to make a tackle or get a returner out of bounds, whereas really they didn't have to do that very often as the kick return was kind of slowly out of the game. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
It very much will. I don't know. Maybe we see the kickers in training camp. I haven't seen it yet, but get in little tackle drills because they're going to have to be more familiar with that, like you said on there. It feels like natural transition, too, because I got to ask some of the other rule changes that we've seen. You bring up tackling. That goes right in with the hip drop tackle, the swivel tackle, understandably all for player safety. This one, as a lot of rules, I guess, seem to be, it feels like a gray area because again, you want people to be healthy and safe and you don't want players getting injured. But it's like, even in some videos and some reports that I saw, I'm like, it's so tough to say, okay, was that a swivel tackle? Was that a hip drop tackle? Why is that one not? You can kind of go all over the place. So I guess curious to get your thoughts. How do you determine, I guess, where that fine line is on a hip drop tackle? Do you think that it's going to be controversial as we're trying to play this out and where that comes from?
This is a tough one, and I think it's already been controversial throughout this rule change process where you've seen a lot of the players coming out, even the NFLPA, and coming out saying they're not in favor of this rule. When you look at rules changes, and I was part of the competition committee for a long time, they really look at a couple of things. Player safety is number one, health and safety. They look at the competitive equity, and then officiating consistency. So when you pass a rule, can the officials officiate it consistently? And I'm not sure, and I think the league understands that this rule can be officiated consistently across the board because of all the things you just said. You could watch 5 tackles, and the league has put out a lot of video, and there's very, very small differences between what is a foul and what isn't. And so you're looking at what the league is trying to do. Player safety is number one, and there have been injuries that have been caused by this type of tackle. And they've done the research, and they said last year there was at least one hip drop or hip drop like tackle every game. And there was at least one significant injury where a player missed time, at least one a week. So, it's not like we had 800 players being injured, but even one is too many. So, look, it's going to be a hard rule to officiate. And I think the league has said, and the officiating department has told the officials, we don't want you to never throw a flag, but you have to be absolutely 100% positive that all of the elements are there for you to throw a flag. So there are going to be plays where we might be watching and we might say that looked like a hip drop tackle and there's no flag, but the league will have the ability during the week to look at the video and find the player and have that supplemental discipline part of it. And I think, again, you got to get a rule on the books if you want to get a dangerous technique out of the game. You have to have a rule, and then you try to figure out, okay, how are we gonna administer it? Is it going to be more flags? Is it going to be more fines? This is going to be more during the week. I don't anticipate a ton of flags on this tackle.
Okay. Because whenever I hear that, and also like you said with the NFLPA and the players coming out, you see lots of tweets and comments and interviews and everything there of like, well, man, these guys have played football all their life, and no offense, but like if you're a smaller guy and you got a tight end that's right in front of you, there's only so many ways you can bring him down, and that's kind of the natural. Like, all right, I'm going to just hip drop and then bring him down that way. So it does change the game, but I'll be curious, like you say, it's. Maybe slowly see the players evolve with that and take it out of their repertoire for the most part. But
all my history experience with players, and this goes back to even 2008, 2009, when we added a lot of protections for the defenseless players, the receivers hitting the head neck area, and defensive players were saying, "Hey, I don't know how I'm going to do it," and they adjusted. They're so good. They end up adjusting. Sometimes you're going to get caught. I mean, it just happens. It's not an intentional thing. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, was there a challenge, a third challenge added? I think that I saw that. Okay. And how does that, I guess, change kind of going two-part with the challenges, but also replay, like real-time help with the officials? What was that going to look like with the league?
So replay and technology have really been a big part of a lot of the rule changes in recent years. And replay has been a positive in terms of helping correct mistakes because the game is so fast. And we there's such a disconnect between how the game is played and officiated on the field. Like if you've ever been on a sideline and watch a game and you go, how do the officials get anything right? And then we get to see it 5 different angles and slow motion. And you're like, how'd you miss that? And so replay is definitely a big help. But so the rule change is each team gets 2 challenges per game. And in order to get a third, you had to win both. Now, if you win one of your first 2, you get that third challenge. So we're going to see more challenges this year. Because now, especially early in games, if a team knows, a coach knows that, hey, we're going to win this challenge, they're going to use it because in the past, they still had to win the second one to get that third challenge. Now, once they win that first challenge, they get a third. So we're going to see more challenges, and it may be on plays that might not seem as significant, but you're going to basically get that third challenge if you win one of the first 2. Replays also, they've added replay assist where the replay officials can give the on-field officials information, objective information in real time. So if they see the ball on the ground or they see the runner's knee on the ground before the ball came loose, they can communicate that to the on-field crew so we could avoid a challenge altogether.
Okay. I like that. The part of, because if you're strategically planning, then you're like, yeah, that's a maybe challenge. I might win it, might not. But if you are waiting for the second one, like you say, to get that third, it makes sense there. So you might see a little bit more of delays, I guess. But all for technology. The highest level, I'm going to say the highest level I've ever officiated was high school basketball. But even at that point, I felt all of just the anxiety and you don't win either way because one side of the fans just hate you. So I can't imagine doing it at a professional level of, to your point, and saying like, okay, the full speed of the game and then getting things right. Because again, hindsight's 2020, and then you watch the game and you're like, I've got all these angles, like you were saying, you've got the replays, like how on earth can they miss that? But naturally the speed of the game is so much faster. I am curious, I guess, on that point, and this is also putting you on the spot. So if you can't think of anything, that's fine. But has there ever been a moment, or even like maybe a fan base where you really felt the brunt of making a call? Because it's got to be, in my mind, I'm envisioning it's got to be a whole lot harder because you're still being objective, but you're coming out, out after the review, you're coming out and going like, I'm about to say something that this entire fan base is going to hate me saying here, but I mean, this is what it is. Is there a specific instance that you can think of in the past?
Oh yeah. I mean, for me, and I was involved in a lot of, there's just, you're involved in calls that are controversial, that are close. And for me, the one call that I'll always be associated with is the Dallas Green Bay Dez Bryant play. And Cowboys fans, I mean, we're coming up. I'm excited because, and I say that sarcastically, it's January 15th will be the 10-year anniversary. And every January 15th, Cowboy fans are sure to remind me, sometimes during the year, but definitely on that day, my social media blows up. But that was—
Wonder why.
Yeah. And we knew, I was in the command center that day, and I knew when the play happened. as soon as, and the irony of Mike McCarthy now being the Cowboys coach, being the Packers coach at the time, as soon as Mike threw the challenge flag, I knew it was going to be controversial either way because it's the Cowboys and the Packers. These are two of the kind of the most prestigious franchises in the NFL. It's a playoff game. It's at Lambeau. And we knew it was going to be controversial either way. And you just try to go into it and apply the rule and be as objective as possible. And that's what we did. And again, whether we overturned it or let it stand, it was going to be controversial. And Cowboy fans didn't like it. That was the rule at the time. And, you just move on. You try to do the best you can in those moments. And sometimes you make a mistake and you come back after and you try to evaluate your own performance and no one's perfect. Ultimately on that one, according to the rule, it was the right call, but I get it. I understand people looking at that and going, man, that should be a catch. And they did change the rule after the fact.
Yeah, I can't imagine the passionate fandom and everything else. I'm actually, because I wasn't going to bait you into a specific instance, but I was hoping that might be brought up. I mean, obviously a Philly fan and everything, but my wife is a Packers fan. So there was also, you made the right call.
We were totally behind that call.
Yes, we were perfectly fine. There's no issues ever with that one. So I can only, I've got other family members that are Dallas fans that didn't really care too much for it. But again, there's always one side that's going to hate it. Naturally, the more heightened the game, the bigger the call, the things like that.
You said the key thing is in officiating, there's no wins. You're really just trying to avoid mistakes. You're trying to avoid train wrecks. You're trying to avoid. There's no wins and losses, and so it's tough. But the officials, when they get into it, they love it. They're passionate about it, and it wouldn't. It's fun. You wouldn't do it if there wasn't something fun about it.
Last part here, I've got to ask you and bring up. I appreciate the time as always here, but the tush push, the brotherly shove, however you want to phrase it here. But I know it's been. I think it's died down somewhat, but there was a little bit of a controversial, right? Whenever it's like, hey, maybe this play is going to be banned. Is the league looking at it? All this other stuff. Naturally, Phillies had a leg up on the whole competition previously. Well, it'd be interesting to see if that continues with Jason Kelce now retired. But would love to know just your thoughts in general, because some people think it's cheating. Some people think it's not a football play. All the basics there, but just your thoughts and if we should expect or think it would be removed.
It's interesting. No, this past cycle, this off season, there was not a lot of discussion about the tush push with the competition committee. Previous year, a lot more. And I think part of it is, like you said, the Eagles were the ones that really perfected this technique, this tactic. And I think when the Eagles, they went to the Super Bowl, they were really, really successful with it. And that's typical. I remember when the Patriots, when they're winning all those Super Bowls, people were looking at what the Patriots were doing and going, wow, that's cheating or that's whatever. And so I think it got a lot more attention when the Eagles were being really successful with it, and other teams were copying it, but weren't as good in terms of executing it. Me personally, I think, look, I'm not saying it's not a skillful. It's not a play. This isn't just a play that doesn't take coordination, that doesn't take skill. I just think there was a rule previously where you couldn't push the ball carrier. It wasn't officiated properly. It really wasn't officiated at all. They took it off the books. And it is, I remember, I think Jason Kelce, I think he made a comment about how he didn't necessarily love that play because of what, being in the middle of it and having all those bodies. But I think there still is a safety factor to it. And while it's quiet right now, it does, if we do get, and knock on wood, hopefully we don't, but if we do get a significant injury on that play, I think you could see more people coming around to saying, get rid of it. I'm kind of indifferent at this point. I'm like, look, if you can do it, great. I never thought it was cheating. I was like, the Eagles were just better at it. They had the personnel, they had, and the numbers weren't that much different than a normal quarterback sneak in terms of third down and fourth down short yardage. So to me, if you can do it, great. And if they do ultimately change it, but I don't see, barring any kind of major injury or rash of injuries, I don't think it's going to get changed.
Dean, I appreciate that because what you said there, the Eagles were just better at that. That's all I needed to hear. It's an unbiased individual. It's someone who could just say that, but the Eagles were just better at that. That's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fact. Believe me, as someone who watches a ton of football, and I'd watch these, and then it went down to college football, and I'd watch these college football programs try to run it, and it was just not good.
Oh yeah,
take that out of the playbook, please.
Yeah, maybe not. Let's just stick with something else. That's not going to work. No, it made me laugh even more so because it's so efficient and it looks so easy every time that Philly ran it, and then you would see because it seemed every time that a team did not get it successful, it seemed to blow up on social media. Oh hey, there's a team that can't get Dallas didn't get it the one week. I think the Chargers another week. It just keeps on continuing, and then Philly's like 92%.
Yeah, watching Jalen Hurts and he's like riding the bodies for 4 yards.
yeah. It's like, hey, if we got a 4th and 4, we might as well line up for that one.
Exactly.
So it makes it fun. But hey, I appreciate it taking this amount of time covering the NFL rules, everything else. Please, everybody, if you're not already, I'm sure you are, but if you're not already, go follow Dean on Twitter or X. I still say Twitter, but at Dean Blandino. You also do cameos, right? I mean, if people's got like birthdays or fantasy football leagues coming up.
This is big fantasy football draft order videos right now.
Okay.
This is a big part of, so a lot of people ask for videos of the draft order. And Dan's a Cowboys fan. That's why I didn't mention it, because the Cowboys are terrible. They haven't won a Super Bowl since when? Since before, the last time the Cowboys won the Super Bowl was 1995. We didn't have iPhones. We might not have had computers. I think Wi-Fi wasn't like a big thing. And Dan, and I know, Jacob, this is your moment, and we'll get to you. But, Dan, I'm going to give you the next 6 months. The Cowboys are going to win 12, 13 games in the regular season. And then they're going to lose in the first round of the playoffs, disappointingly, terribly, probably at home to a team that they should beat. And then Bill Belichick will be your head coach in 2025. There you go. So you have fun with it. There's some funny fantasy football team names out there, and there's some that are not safe for work. But it's definitely a lot of fun.
I can't imagine that. Well, very good. Well, I've got a link in the description too. Anybody want to check out, get a cameo, make sure that Dean keeps the league official. I mean, you have the official Fox Sports NFL rules analyst, but appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Jack.